Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. Have you ever had the goal of hitting $1 million net worth? If you have, you're not alone. That is a pretty common goal here in the financial community. And $1 million net worth does put you in the uppermost brackets, as only 8.8% of US adults are millionaires. And while achieving a 7-figure net worth is a big accomplishment, you often hear people say, $1 million isn't what it used to be. And while that sentiment can feel like someone tossing a big old wet blanket on all your hard work and all your dreams, the fact of the matter is, it's kind of true. The main reason is inflation, something we're all a little bit too familiar with this year. When you start saving for your retirement, you're generally in your 20s or your 30s, so your retirement is 30 or 40 years down the road. And 30 or 40 years of inflation is going to have an impact. For instance, what if we were to rewind 40 years, back to 1982? Let's say you've saved up $1 million. You retire on that and you apply the rule of 4% and live off $40,000 a year. That's a pretty darn impressive nest egg, and that would provide a pretty comfortable lifestyle. But then let's come back to present day. It's 2022. How much would you need to have that same standard of living as someone who retired in 1982 with that $1 million? Well, you would need a nest egg of roughly $3.1 million. Put another way, $1 million in 2022 dollars is roughly equivalent to a $325,000 nest egg in 1982. Oh, and that $40,000 income in 1982, that would be like living on $124,000 a year today. So basically the value of money was cut to a third over those 40 years. And that can be really helpful to know when you're planning your future. Using that line of thinking, a recent analysis from Seeking Alpha said that millennials are going to need anywhere from 3 to 4 million in order to retire comfortably, saying that those more senior millennials around the age of 40 would need about 2.8 million in order to step away from the workforce. And those younger millennials would probably need closer to 3.6 million. But to be on the safe side, it might be wise to round that up to an even 4 million. And Seeking Alpha isn't alone in their recommendations. WealthCare Financial recently suggested that millennials and Gen Z members, meaning those workers who are currently 41 years or younger, will need up to $3 million in retirement savings to properly enjoy their golden years. And while the primary reason for these lofty numbers is inflation, the other contributing factor is the uncertainty that surrounds Social Security. As it stands today, without any changes, the Social Security Trust is set to become insolvent by the year 2035. Obviously, changes will be made to the present system. I don't think the whole system is just going to go belly up. I think the age at which you can claim will continue to rise, and I think the benefit payout will continue to reduce over time. So it's probably safe to assume the younger you are, the less you should count on Social Security being a significant source of income for you in retirement. But let's go back to the numbers, that $3 or $4 million. Those are pretty hefty amounts. I don't think they're unreasonable, but I do think they're pretty hefty amounts to recommend to entire generations. Consider that the average retirement savings for retirees in 2022 was just $168,000. This number does not include one's home value. In fact, WealthCare Financial actually gave benchmark recommendations for net worth at various ages for these Gen Z and millennial members to stay on track to hit this $3 million goal. $500,000 by the age of 25, $1 million by the age of 40, $2 million by the age of 50, and $3 million by the age of 60. And I never want to fault anyone for lofty goals, but there is something amiss with these targets because that's not how compounding works. It is very slow to get it moving in the beginning, but over time, then it starts to accelerate and it starts to snowball. So when I see that the first target is to hit $500,000 at the age of 25, most people probably graduate around the age of 21. So that means you probably have 4 working years, probably your lowest earning years, to stash away $500,000. I just don't know how realistic that is. I mean, you can house hack all you want, you can side hustle. I just don't think for most people that's possible. And then they give you 15 years to double your money and hit $1 million. I don't know. It seems like those numbers are off. What do you guys think? If I was going to have the goal of hitting 3 million by retirement age, here's the benchmarks I might use. 300,000 by the age of 30, 750,000 by the age of 40, 1.5 million by the age of 50, and 3 million by the age of 60. It is just hardest to save that first million. Each subsequent million milestone gets incrementally easier because you have money invested and working for you. But those initial amounts, saving that first $100,000 or that first $500,000, you are doing the vast majority of the legwork. It is the amount of money that you are stashing away in your savings and investments that really matters. But as time goes on and you have more put away into investments, that's when you start to notice compounding interest doing its magic and doing the brunt of the legwork. And just for some perspective, the average investment balance for those aged 25 to 34 is just $14,100. So certainly a far cry from these numbers. And if you're going to hit the goal of $3 or $4 million, you need a lofty savings rate. You're just not going to hit it if you're saving $100 a month. Even if you were to save $500 a month, assuming an 8% rate of return, you would need 50 years to hit that $4 million mark. And you certainly could have a 50-year time horizon if you, say, worked from the age of 20 to the age of 70, not unheard of by any means. But there really are only two factors you have control over when it comes to your investments: the amount you save or your savings rate, and your time horizon. And if you don't want to retire at 70 and instead you want to retire at a more traditional age like 60, you're going to have to up your savings rate. Ultimately, you're going to have to save around $1,300 each month if you want to reach a $4 million mark by the time you hit 60. Now, could you save less than $1,300 in your 20s when you're just starting out, when your income is its lowest, and then slowly increase your savings rate over time as your earnings increase? Of course you can. But just remember, the less you save at the beginning, the harder it is for future you to catch up, because those dollars you invest in your 20s are your most powerful because they have the longest time horizon to compound. What you invest in your 20s is far more powerful than what you invest in your 30s or your 40s. So the less you save early on in your career, the harder you make it for future you to catch up, the more future you has to save. The earlier you invest, the more you pass off the work to the magic of compounding. The later you invest, the more of the legwork you have to do with your savings rate. Perhaps you've seen this chart or charts like this that shows just how big the cost of delaying to get invested really is. So if you're aiming to have a multi-million-dollar net worth, delaying your start to investing is a mistake you can't really afford to make for the typical person, simply because with typical wages, it becomes next to impossible to make up for that lost ground. For instance, you would have to save $3,000 a month to hit a $4 million goal at the age of 60 if you were to start from zero at the age of 30. That would be $36,000 a year just towards investments. Maybe your budget allows for that, but for most Americans, that's not possible. When it comes down to it, saying that if you're going to retire in 30 years, you're going to need $3 or $4 million stems from the same mentality where people say you need to have $1 million in order to retire today. Basically, the people who believe this took that $1 million number, extrapolated it out, and factored in inflation. There is no doubt that inflation has a huge impact on what your money can buy, and it seems all too reasonable that in a few decades, it'll be the norm to want to have the goal of retiring on a few $1 million for those in the financial independence community. If you speak with people today who've already saved up $1 million, they say they don't feel wealthy. Some things worth mentioning: we often hear that retirement rule that you need $1 million in order to retire. Many people, in fact, most people, retire on far less than that. How much you need to retire is very individual and based on your lifestyle. If you enter into retirement completely debt-free, including no mortgage, you may be looking at a very low-cost retirement. Also, the activities you want to do and how much you want to travel, that's going to play a huge factor as well. Also, these kind of blanket rules don't consider alternative retirements, like people who downsize their home and go to a more affordable location, or people who engage in geo arbitrage and literally pick up their life, move to an entirely different country to capitalize on a lower cost of living. To say that every retiree today needs $1 million in order to retire is inaccurate and misses the point of individual needs. Some need more, some need less. 30 or so years from now, people will need more to retire than they do today. Absolutely. Will they need 3 or 4 million? Some will need more, some will need less. 3 or 4 million, 3 or 4 decades from now is likely to be similar to what $1 million is today. And there will be people who reach that level and they'll say, I feel normal. I feel average. I don't feel wealthy. With time, wages will increase. The median household income in the US rose to $70,000 in 2021. Back in 1990, it was just $30,000. In 1982, the median household income was just $23,000. As wages increase, people's savings will increase, and thus people will more easily hit higher net worths. Income is such a huge component of this. It is a heck of a lot harder to save $1,000 a month if your income is $40,000 a year than if your income is, say, $90,000 a year. So hitting the $3 or $4 million mark is entirely possible for super savers. Achieving a net worth of $1 million probably seemed like a very audacious goal in 1982. Just like achieving a net worth of $3 or $4 million seems like an audacious goal today. But if you give yourself enough of a runway, if you put your head down, you work hard, you grow your income, you save, you invest, you can probably get there. What do you guys think? Leave your thoughts in a comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. Have a good one. I'll see you soon. Bye.